Okay. So, did you guys receive the email which I had sent out? I believe I've shared the installables last night.
Yes, yes. I'm downloading that. Yeah, I have some.
Okay. Okay.
Rahul, I have not checked it. Maybe I'll do.
Okay.
Yeah.
No issues. We'll do the installation tomorrow. No issues.
Okay.
Okay. So what I would suggest you guys that just download them and keep them in C drive and extract those three files using 7-zip. Do not use any other tool to extract. Only use 7-zip.
Okay. Okay.
And just keep the files ready in C drive. Tomorrow, whenever we connect, we'll start the installation.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Rah-
One.
Rah- Sorry,
Yeah.
Rahul. I have Mac, so you'll help me with setting up that.
Okay. So no. So Mac will not work. Okay.
Okay.
So this is only for Windows. So IBM possibly they have stopped, creating any product for Mac. I mean, developer product. I believe even IBM BPM 8.6 also never had any version on for Mac.
Oh, okay. Then I have a small laptop. I'll use that one. I'll set up by tomorrow.
Yeah. So guys, just one more thing. There is the prerequisite for this setup is that your RAM should be at least of 8 GB, and Windows can be anything. It can be 7, 10, 11, 8, doesn't matter. And of course, it should be a Windows system. Okay. All right. Okay. One more thing before we start. Are you guys comfortable with this time 8:30?
Actually, eight is much better for me
Okay.
because
8 is
my office time will be very near to start.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll start somewhere around 8, 5 past 8 or 10 past 8.
Okay. No problem.
Okay. All right. Let me share my screen. Okay. So today we're going to start, understanding this IBM BPM more from a developer's perspective. So by which you can understand that our lab sessions are going to start from today onwards. And whatever components we discussed yesterday, like process admin, workflow center, we already discussed yesterday, and you are already seeing it right now. Apart from that, we have process admin, process portal, VAS admin. Then we had the other things like say process inspector. Even we have a component called REST API. So all these things we are going to cover in our sessions. Okay. So as we move ahead with the lab sessions, so sometime we'll go into some theoretical session and just understand about that component, and then we'll again come back to our lab sessions. So we are going to create a process application like we discussed yesterday. That is the first thing that we usually do is to create a process application. And then we go inside the process application and we start developing our application. So we are going to design a leave application process. Okay, a very simple one. It will not be much complex, a very simple process to start with, where an employee would submit his leave details and the manager would take some action. Okay. Now, as we move forward with our lab sessions, we are going to add more features and more complexities into this process. So, our first implementation would be to create a process and to understand what kind of activities we can add in the process. Definitely, we are going to know like which kind of activities we use more nowadays. Okay. So these are the things we are going to cover today. And if we have time, then we'll also start understanding the different types of variables that we have in IBM BPM. Okay. So we'll keep it simple. So first, let's create a process application. So process application is created from the right hand side palette. As I said you, whenever you log into Workflow Center, if you go to the right hand side palette, the first option says create new process app. Now, whenever you're naming a process application, like you see, there is something called BPM Sandbox, and the reason behind this naming is that's a kind of application which I have created where I do my own POCs. Okay, it can be something related to this training, or it can be something related to my office work, which I practice at my end. That is the reason I have created that application. But whenever I'm going to work for a project, or I'm developing an application for a customer or client, so the name that I'm providing to this application should be very familiar, or should be very much, it should sound very meaningful with the implementation that you are about to do. So I would give a name here, leave application. Leave application. So there's a name that I'm giving, and you see when I was adding the name, some acronym was also getting generated. You see LA, it came. If I remove it again, this acronym will also be gone. Okay, so whatever name you write, your acronym would also generate in that way. The good thing is that you can still customize this acronym if you want to add something more, or if you want to if you want to add your own acronym, whatever you want to add, you can add that. Next, we have something called documentation. This is optional. If you want to document, if you want to add something, add some kind of information over here, like what is the reason behind creating this application, or if you want to, write down the requirement over here. So it's up to you. You can add the documentation, but this is not mandatory. Acronym is mandate. Without an acronym, I cannot create a process application. But without a documentation, I can definitely go and create it. Below you have something called, you see there's a checkbox which says open in process designer. It is enabled by default, which means whenever I'll click on create, this would take me inside the process application directly. Okay. If I disable this, it will just create the process application, and then I need to go inside this application and I need to start my development. So I disable the checkbox and I clicked on create, and this process application, you can see, got created. Right at the top it says leave application, and to its right the option we have open in designer. So I'm going to click on that. This would take me inside this process application, and right now if you see the URL has also changed. Now I am not in my process center or workflow center. Right now I am inside process designer. Now how do I differentiate this by my URL? Let me just copy this thing. You see here, this is the actual URL of my process designer. And if you see here, we have the same host name and port number. Then we have a slash, and then we have something called webpd. Webpd stands for web process designer. So this is the URL for your process designer, and you can easily navigate it from your workflow center. Okay. Now we are going to design a process where what we have understood is that we are going to implement few activities. Okay. Okay. What is a business process, guys? Any idea what is a business process?
A solution to a business problem, like
Okay.
yeah.
I think it's a workflow to implement a process.
Workflow to implement a process. Okay. 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 We basically, I believe we all understand what is a process. Process is something that we are, following every day. We undergo several processes in a day, right? Say, even if I talk about our day-to-day process, like, waking up in the morning, then we brush our teeth, then we have our breakfast, right, and then start working, or we take shower. So there are different activities that we are doing every day, and whenever all these activities are getting completed, I say that my process is also completed. So I can say in a way that a process is nothing but is a set of sequential activities, which when gets completed, when the activities are completed, my process is also successfully completed. Now I use the term sequential activities, which is very important here. Now when you wake up in the morning, you directly don't go and go for office. So we do have certain activities that we have to do, and then only we can do that activity. Similarly, if I talk about a business process, so even every organization, every sector has certain processes of their own. Okay. And IBM BPM is one of the BPM tools which are used to automate those business processes. If you talk about an automobile industry or an insurance sector or some banking sector, everywhere there is some business processes there, right? And business process is always internal to the business, so it would need some approvals, and you will have multiple approval levels, and there would be notifications, and all those things generally we implement in a process. So similarly, if I come back to our lead application, this is also a process that we are designing for some organization. And here what will happen is that an employee would submit the leave details, and the manager would approve or reject that leave details. Okay, it is a very simple process, and by this you can understand that this process would have only two activities initially for the time being. One would be the employee activity, and the second would be the manager activity. Going forward, whenever we are going to learn, database integrations and REST integrations, all these different integration techniques, that time we are going to add more activities like system activities over here. Okay, so let's create a process and also understand what are the components that we see right now in the process, and definitely we'll also discuss about the different activities that can be added in a process. Now, to create a process, like I said yesterday, we have to go to the left hand side palette, and here we have something called processes. And whenever you want to create something new, click on the plus sign, and then you click on process. It would ask you for a name, and the name has to be very meaningful. There should not be anything called test, or okay, nothing called test should be there, and the process name should be very meaningful to the requirement. And definitely if the name is big, if you're if you're including some more than one string in your name, then definitely put a space in between. Okay, these are all the best practices, and we are going to follow these best practices while we implement all the scenarios. So the name would be very meaningful, so I can give a name, leave application process. That's how I give a name, and then I click on finish. This would create the process, and we would be able to see the design, the default design right now. Yes, somebody has a question. Okay, so this is the definition or the design of the process, where we can see something called start, then I see something called inline user task, and then we have something called end. Okay, and I see some arrows which are connected in between these three components, right? And also what we also see, we see that this entire thing is placed in something called team, and we have a very similar kind of thing again called system. Okay, so let's understand one by one. What are they? First, the start. The start is nothing but it's a start event. Okay, event is a huge thing in IBM BPM. So start event is is just a 0.01% of that entire thing. So start event is used to start a process, as simple as that. Similarly, going ahead, whenever we are going to create the human services or the different service flows like Ajax service, integration services. So over there also we have to implement the start and end event. Start event will always start your process if it's a service, and it will start your service. And end event will end your process, or it will end the service there. Okay. So start, it signifies the beginning of your process, and end signifies the end of your process. Okay, and what we have in between them, we will have the different type of activities. Okay, so one of them you are already seeing, inline user task. This is also one type of activity, and usually inline user task is not used in a process, so we use something called user task, not an inline user task. Inline user task is basically used whenever you create a process for the first time. By default, inline user task is added, and the reason behind it, right now if I run this process will not throw any error. Why? Because inline user task has been attached with some dummy service, and if I run this process, it will work. Okay, at least the process will not fail. In the older versions, if I go back to 8.5.7 or 8.5.6 or 8.5, that time we never had this inline user task. So whenever you create a process, if I create a process in the older versions, only start and event end event are added. Then we have to, from the right hand side, if you see, there are a lot of components are there. From here we used to add the activities, but now they also give you an inline user task which you can later on change into whatever activity you want to implement here. Okay, we'll discuss more about the different activities. First, let's understand the other things which are much more simpler. Now, what are these things? I was calling them arrows, but in IBM BPM we call them as sequence flows. Okay, and a sequence flow is used to connect the different activities or components that we add in a process. Not only a sequence flow is available in your process layer, but also it is also available in the different service layers that we have. Okay, and definitely you can understand the reason behind implementing the sequence flow. I use the term when I was defining a business process, that is, it's a sequential activities, right? The set of sequential activities. So if I have to place my activities in a sequential order, then definitely I need to connect them with some sequence flow. That is the reason we have this sequence flow over here. If you add more activities, you need to add more sequence flows and add those activities in the process. Now, what is this team? We see something called team, and then we see something called system. Now these are called lanes. Okay, so we call them as lanes, or even many people will call them as swim lanes also. Okay, and swim lanes or lanes are mainly are of two types. One is a human lane and the other is a system lane. What you see here at the top which says team, it's a human lane, and what you see below is a system lane. Now what is a human lane and what is a system lane? Human lane can contain only human activities or user activities. Okay, and system lane can consist of only system activities. Now, first of all, let's understand the significance of this lane. Okay, whenever we get a requirement, okay, from the customer or the client, so after we analyze the requirement, we first try to understand how many teams are involved in the process. Okay, say for example, if I take a very complex process, say uh, personal loan application process, say maybe some bank is there and we are designing their uh, loan application process. Now a loan application process involves a lot of teams. Okay, so you will have the the front desk team will be there who will be responsible to upload the documents. Okay, then there would be one more team, say verification agency, who will verify the customer. Okay, and then again within the verification agency there can be multiple teams. So one would verify the residence of the customer. One team would verify the uh, the employment of the customer, whether he's really employed in that company where he has mentioned. And the other verification team will verify the references of the customer. So different teams are involved, and then we have another team who is responsible in taking the final action, that is the credit manager, who would take the action on the application that the customer has submitted. So, and then finally some email notification is sent to the customer that your loan has been approved or rejected. So we have like 3 to 4 teams which are involved in that process. So whenever I'm going to design a process, first thing that I have to understand, how many teams are involved. If there are 3 teams involved, then I have to add 3 human lanes, and each human lane will signify each team. Okay. If I come back to our process leave application, can you tell me how many teams are involved in this process? Guys, are you there?
Yes, yes.
How many teams are involved in leave application process, which we
Oh,
discussed?
yeah. Now we have only one here
Why we have only one team?
because only one activity is there. So,
No, we are about to implement that process,
okay,
but we discussed about the requirement, like an employee would submit the leave and the manager has to take an action. So how many teams are involved in the process?
two teams. Yeah,
Two teams, right? So one is the employee team and the other would be the manager team.
one is a team.
So now we understand that in our requirement we have two teams. So if we have two teams, then we should have two human lens. Now we understand like how to add the human lens, like how to understand how many human lens will be there. Now there can be n number of human lens, which I by which I mean if there are n number of teams involved in a process, then the same number of lanes also I need to have in this process. Now each human lane I have to add and I have to rename it in a way or have to use it in a way that each lane resembles each team. Okay, so in our case we will have two human lanes. So by default already one human lane is added. You see here something called team. So you can just rename it. Either you double click on it. Okay, you can rename in this way. So I add something called employee. And how and what is the other way I can rename it? The other way is just click on it. In IBM BPM, whenever you click on any component, okay, the properties of that component are visible below. Okay, you see here we have some property called general property, and inside that we have two sections, common and behavior. The first section which says common, here also you can change the name. So whatever you are changing here, it will reflect at the top.
These all lanes called as classes.
No,
Okay.
there's no concept of class in IBM BPM.
Okay.
Okay, so now we have one human lane and one system lane. So we would like to have one more lane here, one more human lane, because I have one more team called manager who are also involved in this process. So how to add a lane? Very simple. On the right hand side palette, you see there are a lot of components are there which can be added in this process. The first component says lane. So if you drag this, just simply you select it and drag it over here. Okay, that's how we add a lane, and you can again rename the lane. So this time I would rename from the property below. I would give a name, say manager. Okay, so now we have exactly two human lanes which are needed, and we have one system lane. Now the question is, which can come into your mind, that like we are having multiple human lanes, can we also have multiple system lanes? The answer is no. We should not have. We should have only one system lane. But by mistake, if I add one more system lane, will it affect the process? Will it throw any error? No, there won't be any error. But as per the best practices, I should have only one system lane and I can have multiple human lanes. That is not a problem. We can have multiple human lanes, but system lane only should be one. Now, what are the activities that we can add in a system lane? What kind of activities? We can add only those kind of activities in a system lane which doesn't involve any human intervention. Any kind of automated activity. Say, for example, I want to send an email to the back to the employee after the manager has approved or rejected the application. So that would be an email activity or some email integration that I would be doing, and I would place this activity in the system lane and not in any of the human lanes. We also need to make sure that we have to add system activities only in the system lane. I should not go and add it in any of the human lanes. Okay. Now, if you ask me whether it will throw any error, no, it will not throw any error. But again, the best practice is system lanes should consist of only system activities, and human lane should consist of only user tasks or user activities. Okay. Now, how to differentiate that this is a human lane and this is a system lane? This is important, right? Only by the name, uh, we don't really differentiate. Definitely, there is some property by which we understand that it's a human lane or it's a system lane. If I select the system lane, if you see below the properties, there is a property called behavior. In this behavior, we have some option called is system lane, and it is a checkbox, you see, and this checkbox is enabled. Whenever you see a checkbox is enabled for a lane, this checkbox which says is system lane, then that is considered as a system lane. If I select the employee lane, you see here is system lane is not enabled, which clearly shows that this lane is a human lane and not a system lane. Okay. You see something here called default lane team, where by default some all users team is added. Ideally, I should create my own team and I should add here. I should map it here. Okay. So whenever you're creating a process, by default, this out of box team all users is added. Basically, this all users team, it consists of all the users which are available in this server. Okay. So these are all the out of the box teams that are there already. And whenever you add some user in the server, whether it's from the process admin or whether it's from the employee directory like I was telling yesterday, so all those users gets added under this out of the box team called all users. Okay, but ideally we should not use it. We should use only our team. So say if employee is involved, then I should create a team separately called employee, and I should add all the users in the team, and then I should map the team over here. Okay, so we are definitely going to do this going ahead, where I'm going to show you how to create a team and how to add it in this lane as well. Now, let's understand what are the different types of activities that we can add in a process. Okay, now mainly two types of activities we add. One is a user task. Okay, user task is where you can implement a UI, where you can implement a user interface through which the end user will participate in the process, and from where they can participate, yesterday we discussed, which is the component, Anup.
from the process portal.
Process portal. Yes, process portal is the component through which an end user can participate in the process, right? Now, what is the other type of activity that we often use? We use system task a lot. System task is used, to integrate multiple integration flows into this process. Say, if I want to call some external application to get some data, or say this entire transaction, like the employee is submitting the leave details and the manager is approving or rejecting the leave details. This entire transaction I want to update in a database table. Or say I want to send some kind of email notification to the customer, so to the employee as well as to the manager. So this kind of implementations we do often in a project, and all these activities are represented using system activity. Okay, so these two activities are the main: user task, system task. Okay, we also call an activity as a task, so you can call it as a user activity or a user task, and you can call it a system activity or a system task. So let's see what are the different activities that are available. So on the right hand side, the first component was a lane and the second component is an activity. You can, by now you have understood one thing is clear, that without an activity a process cannot be created. We should have some activities in the process, then only I can design the process. So you see next to this activity there is a drop down, and these are the different activities that are available in this process layer. Okay, what is the first one? First one is a user task. That is exactly I was speaking about few minutes back. This is something we implement in every process. Okay, it involves BPM coach. It involves a human service and the BPM coach. So going ahead, definitely we are going to learn how to create a human service in our coming sessions. Right now, just to understand, a user task is added so that I can develop some user interface for the end user. Second is inline user task. So inline user task is never implemented in a process. This is like a kind of dummy activity You see, a task that is performed by a person but does not require an implementation. You know, there are certain dummy features which you already have in this IBM BPM, and the reason behind adding these dummy features, I will tell you. There can be some mistake done by a developer, right? So if I create a process and say somehow uh, say some other features are also being built in some other process, and somebody takes a version and deploy it to some environment. Now this process, say it doesn't have any inline user task, it has only a start and an end event. If I just run this process right now without an inline user task, it will fail because there are no connections in between. Okay, and there is no activity also. But if I add an inline user task and if I run it right now, it will work. Okay, this process will at least create some instance and the tasks will be there. Although it has no implementation, although I haven't added any UI or nothing, and it cannot be added also, basically. So it's a inline user task is mainly used to implement any dummy activity in the process. But when you are doing any development, make sure after you have completed your development, there should not be any inline user task in your process. Okay, there should not be any dummy activity in your process, right? That is my inline user task. Robot task, this is not fully implemented. Okay, so IBM product team, they are planning to integrate an automation tool in this BAW, possibly in the next version. And the reason behind is that we, for implementing any RPA solution, okay, we used to use either Automation Anywhere or Blue Prism. Okay, now all these tools, yes, they belong to IBM right now, but there were some third-party tools which were, which IBM went ahead and acquired them. Okay, even this IBM BPM is also not IBM, so it was somewhere, it was with Lombardy, and then IBM acquired it. Now IBM has created its own RPA tool. Okay, I forgot the name. I heard it last year. So they created one own their own RPA tool, and they would add this RPA tool inside BAW, which is still now it's not there. So maybe in the next version they're going to add that, and there you can implement this robot task very easily, because somewhere down the line you also need to take training on RPA separately. So that is something that we have to, in the coming years we have to, get ourselves trained in some of the RPA technologies. That is important. Now, coming to this robot task, if anyone over here is comfortable or if they're aware of Automation Anywhere or Blue Prism, then definitely you can integrate this robot task. Robot task involves some automation tool. Okay, so through Automation Anywhere, I can give an example. Say I implement some kind of chatbot or some kind of robot task. Say for example, I'm adding some data in some table. Or I would give a very easy example. Say whenever you go to some external interface, okay, this has happened many websites where you try to apply for some loan. There would be some, you see, there would be some questionnaires which would come automatically in front of you. What is your age? Please select your age in between. Where are you born? Then they will give you four options. You will select some option, it will go away. The question will go away. Then again, some question will appear, and you might see some kind of robot or something is there on the screen, which actually is keeping you busy. Okay, and what you're doing at the end of the day, you're actually filling up an application form in that way. So the robot is asking you, and at the back end, he's filling up an application form for you, basically with those information. So this kind of implementations can be done in IBM BPM. Okay. So if I have to implement them, then in that case I have to use this robot task, and yes, I have to know some RPA tool, some RPA technology, either Automation Anywhere, or there is another tool which is Blue Prism also, I believe, can be implemented here. So this is about robot task. Next is system task. Again, it's an automated task. So this is also used a lot in projects. You will see if you open any project, if you open any process, you will see system tasks definitely has to be there. Okay. So there can be some database integrations, there can be some external calls, there can be some REST integrations, there can be some email integrations, there can be some SMS integrations. So a lot of integrations if I want to implement in my process layer, I have to use a system task. And system task, like I said, it can be placed or it should be placed only in the system lane. But yes, by mistake, if you've added in a human lane, it will not throw any error. Okay. Next is decision task. Now this decision task is is something which can be added in the process layer, but the original significance of a decision task is not available in your web process designer. Okay. The actual significance of a decision task is so initially we used to use the desktop designer, and there we had something called decision service. Okay. Decision service is going to get deprecated very soon, and I'll tell you the reason behind. I hope you guys are aware of something called rule engine.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yes. So rule engine is is a kind of technology where we can implement some kind of business rules. Okay. For example, if we talk about the IBM's product, that is ODM, Operational Decision Manager, and if you use the Operational Decision Manager, so there are different types of components are there which can be used to define some kind of rule. One of them is decision table. Then we have something called decision tree. Then we also have something called business action language or BAL rule. We call it also as BAL rule or business action language rule. Decision table, decision tree. I believe you guys can visualize, like you have seen somewhere, at least. I'm pretty sure decision tables or a decision tree. Well, at least we have seen that in the data structure when we did our engineering days. Bell rule, on the other hand, is a kind of, you are defining some rule in the form of very simple language. Say, I define a rule. If A is greater than B, then difference is A minus B. Okay. Else, if B is greater than A, then difference is B minus A. This is how we define a business action language rule, okay, or a Bell. Now, IBM BPM also they had added this feature initially. Okay, when Lombardi was there, when IBM went and acquired that product and added more features, went on and added more features till 8.5.6. This decision service was there or is there, even is still there in your desktop designer. But unfortunately, it is nowhere there in your web designer. Now I'll tell the reason. In IBM BPM, the decision service which we create, I can add either a decision table or I can add some business action language, which is very good. That uh, you can think right now that okay, so it's such a good thing. So I can define the business rules within BPM. I don't have to use another tool, ODM. But the problem is that in ODM, if I'm defining a decision table where I can implement n number of business rules. But unfortunately, the decision table that we have in IBM BPM, we can add only four business rules. Now, if you're implementing a project, okay, uh, in ODM or in any rule engine, and when you're defining a business rule or when you're defining some business rules for the customer, there will be multiple conditions. Okay, multiple scenarios will be there, multiple business rules will be there. So only four rules is not enough to implement an entire application. That is the reason nobody used to use that decision table whenever they had to implement any business rules. We always used to integrate ODM with IBM BP. That is much more easier. I define the rules over there. Over there also I can create a version. What version I can create? So it is based on Eclipse, so you can understand. So I can get a jar from there, and that jar I can import in this process application, and I can easily do an integration and I can call that rule engine and I can get some result. So this is one thing, that multiple business rules cannot be implemented in a decision table. Only four are allowed. Coming to business action language. In business action language in ODM, I can add multiple conditions in a statement. Okay, like if A is greater than B, then again I can add an and again I can add another condition, and then I can define the result. Then sub difference is A minus B, like this. This is the result. But unfortunately, in IBM BPM, if I have to define a business action language, I can have only one condition. I cannot add more than one condition. So adding this feature itself doesn't sound very logical. And that is the reason behind that, when they created this web process designer, they never added that decision service over here. Okay. So, which clearly, uh, which is clear that this decision service, since it is not there, so they are going to remove the desktop designer anyway. So that could also remove that feature. Or I don't know, maybe they might add this over here. But I discussed some with some of my seniors who are working for 16 years, 17 years in IBM BPM. So even they also confirm that since decision task is not used, so that feature was not added in the web designer, and that is the reason behind your this desktop designer is getting deprecated, and they haven't added that in this web designer because that is also getting deprecated. Okay, but still, if you want to see how to implement a decision service, I can show you from the desktop designer. So we can do it in some of our sessions where where we would cover all the topics, and maybe in the last day, or where we clear the doubts. That time I'll show you. It's not a big thing. So okay, so this is my decision task where we can implement some decision, and decision tree is not available in IBM BPM, so only we have decision table and business action language. Next is server script, another important component of my process layer. Now in IBM BPM, the language that we use to write a code, we call it as a Teamworks language. Okay, it's called Teamworks language. Teamworks is basically it was the first team, or it was a team who created this product Lombardi. And going ahead, their name is being used as a coding language of IBM BPM. Yes, it follows Java. Somewhere it follows Java, and in this server script, like you can see, it's basically it is used to write some code. Okay, and this code, like you're seeing right now, it says runs JavaScript code on the server, which actually means that yes, I can definitely write some JavaScript. But yes, I can also add the Teamworks language, which we would be seeing very soon. Okay, so this kind of whatever coding we want to add in the process layer, I can add it in the server script. And now the question is, where I should add the server script? Definitely I have to add it in the system layer. Why? Because it's a code, again it's an automated task, so I should always add any automated task in the system layer. Okay, which would not involve any human. This is my server script. Next we have sub process. Guys, anywhere if you face any doubt, stop me there and ask me some question. Okay, if you have any doubts. Okay, coming to sub process. Sub process is used basically, say, if you think about this leave application process. Okay, now our last activity is the manager activity, right, who would take some action like either approve or reject. Now after the manager activity is completed, say I implement three sequential system activities in the system web. Okay, three. First system activity, what it will do, it will update the database with this entire transaction. The second activity will send an email to the manager as well as to the employee, just sharing an update about the entire leave application process. Like your leave was this, and it has been approved. And the third activity, it would whatever data we have here. Say I am just getting the data and I'm sending the data to some external application. Okay, maybe some other application also needs the same data from us. So I am making a call I'm implementing a system activity in system lane, and that would share the entire information to some other application. So we have three system activities in a sequential order. Now, what it is said that if you have any sequential activities, okay, if you have any sequential set of activities, whether in a system lane or in a human lane, I can add all these activities together under a single subprocess. Okay, what is the reason behind doing this? Will it throw any error if I add the sequential activities in any lane? No, it will not throw any error. It will still work. Using a subprocess, it has been observed that the response time, whatever activities you add in a subprocess, the processing time is much faster. Okay, the processing time becomes much more faster if you are using a subprocess, and going inside the subprocess you define those three sequential activities. And even from the look and view perspective, from the developer's perspective, from the developer's look and view perspective, adding all these sequential activities together in a lane is is much better in case if you have activities, a lot of activities are there. Say once you are going from the employee activity, then you again go to a system activity, then again you go back to the manager activity, then again you go back to another system activity. In this kind of scenario I cannot define a sub process. But say after the employee activity we are triggering manager activity, then after manager activity I am triggering three system activities in a sequential order. So in this kind of scenario I can implement the sub process, and which is much more better, okay, from the processing point of view, and even from the look and feel point of view as a developer. Okay, instead of seeing three sequential activities, adding them one by one, better you define a sub process, and inside the sub process you define those activities. Okay, so we are going to cover this in our session. So sub process, whatever you're seeing, we are going to cover everything uh, in our sessions except for robot task, because robot task would need some training on any of the RPA tools. And going ahead, we are actually waiting for IBM to add that RPA tool in our BAW. So then we would get trained in that basically. So I will get that name. I will find out that name and I'll share it with you guys. You can also find it out if some training or something is going on that. So you can also take the training for that specific RPA tool. Okay. So this is my sub process. Next is linked process. Say from this process I want to call another process. So if I have to implement this scenario, then I have to use a linked process. Okay, linked process activity, whenever you add it in your system lane of a process, so going to that linked process activity I can map any process whatever I want to. Okay, obviously depending on the requirement. If I have a requirement where I have to trigger a process from another process, then in that case definitely I should go for a linked process activity. Okay, last but not the least, we have event sub process. So we want to cover this event sub process in our event session. And event sub process, it actually means that, say you have defined a process, say this leave application process has been defined. Now I add another sub process in my system lane, which would run in parallel with the main process. Okay, and what kind of implementations I can do? Say I'm trying to send some notification to some other teams that that this person has submitted the leave application. So some kind of notifications I'm sending, some kind of information I'm sending to some other process from here. Okay, so this kind of implementation, I can explain you more about this if you had already done events, but since we haven't, so this will more complicate things. So better we park it for an event session. Let us discuss that at that point of time, because this would need a lot of things to know first, and then only we can understand what is an event sub process. Event itself is a huge thing. Okay, so start event and end event are possibly 2% of the entire event thing. So Event subprocess something after you learn all the event components, then at the end we come to the event subprocess. Okay. So by now, at least just try to understand that if I add an event subprocess, it runs in parallel with the main process. Okay. So how to implement it, how it is involved, how we can include it in the process layer, we'll discuss that later on. Okay. So these many activities we have which can be implemented in my process layer. And like I said, we mainly use user task and system task and also script. And if there is a requirement where we need to, call some other process, then definitely I would go for a linked process activity. Okay. So these are the things which we use. Now let's complete the design of our process, which we had discussed initially. So we would have two activities. One would be for the employee and the other would be for the manager. Okay, so let's add them. So how to add an activity? First we have added, I believe we have already added a lane called manager. So now we are going to add another activity on the manager lane. So simply from here I can just select the first one and drag it over here. Now this was an inline user task, this below task which we had added, which was already added in the process. So this we would convert in a user task. So how can we convert it into a user task? See, two ways are there. Either you delete this and then you drag it from the right hand side. This is one way. The second way is, as I said you, whenever you click on any component in IBM BPM, the properties of that component are visible below. Okay, so here you see all the different properties are visible below. First property says general property, and the second property says implementation. In this implementation, you see here we have something called activity type. If I click on it, I can see the different type of activities that are available, and that can be implemented in this inline user task. Okay, so I will select user task. Okay, this way also I can change any implementation of an activity. Okay, just going to the implementation property and changing the activity type. Now here I would name this activity as employee task. Names should be very meaningful. So like you added a user task, please don't keep it like the same. Please change the name to something meaningful. So if it, whether it's a task for the employee, or what is the subject or what is the objective of the task, so that also you can add. So here I would add, say, manager task. Now, why I was telling that you can add a subject of the task. The reason behind is you can have multiple manager activities in a lane, right? I mean, this kind of scenario also can come. Like, say, this employee has submitted the leave details. Then the leave details is going to the manager. He's taking the action. After the manager says, approve or reject, then again it comes back to this lane. I have another employee activity over here which would be triggered, and through that the employee would be able to see the message on the screen that your leave application has been approved or rejected. So there can be multiple activities also in the lane. It is not that I can have only one user activity in a human lane. I can have multiple activities, okay, depending on the requirement. So in that kind of scenario, just by adding employee task and manager task will not help. You can understand that, I hope, that one activity can be employee, uh, submit leave details. Another activity I can have in the employee lane, which would, display uh, display action, okay, or display result, something like that. So whatever we add, the name, then the name should be has to be meaningful. So let us connect this one by one. So you see how I'm connecting. So you see whenever I'm hovering my mouse on top of this activity, I see there are a lot of control points. These are called the control points. And from this control point, if you just hover your mouse, you see some arrow. There's a sequence flow which is coming out. Just drag it and connect it to the next activity. Okay, very simple. And then again from the manager task, that which is considered right now, this is the last activity. Although going ahead we're going to add more, but for now this is the last activity. So I'm going to connect this to the end event. Make sure we have a connection from the last activity to the end event. If you don't have, you know what will happen after this, a process will fail. Okay, it will fail and it will throw an error that the connection is not defined. So make sure whatever activities we're adding, everything is connected through sequence flows. And definitely, the most important connections are from the start event to the task, and from your last task to the end event. These connections are also very important. And what is more important is that placing the start and end events in a meaningful place. If you see here, my employee task is the first activity of this process. So the start event is also placed in the same lane. This is meaningful. But the manager task is the last activity in the process, but the end event is placed in the employee lane. So this doesn't look meaningful. Whichever task is your last activity in the process, you have to add your end event in the same lane. Same for your start event also. Whatever activity is considered as the first activity of the process, wherever you have placed that, whichever lane you have placed that activity, your start event also should be placed in the same lane. Okay, again, best practices. If I don't follow them, no, there will not be any error, but still, these are the best practices. Okay, so we'll keep it in the manager lane. Whatever diagram or whatever design you are doing, make sure it should look good. That is something which I focus on whenever I am doing any design of the process, because it's a very simple process. You will see a lot of complexities whenever we're adding. There will be multiple lanes can be there, multiple activities will be there, but whenever you define the sequence flows, make sure the way you're defining it should look very clean. Okay, there should be a lot of space. You can simply, if you see, if you scroll, if you just select this and if you just move it, you see as more spaces are getting added. Okay, the scroll bar, if you see, you can just scroll it till the right side. So this way you can make it clean if you have more activities, if you're adding in the lanes. So this is about the design of my process. Okay, any questions till now, guys?
No, no, I'm good.
Here, can we use a decision task, Rahul, in the place of a manager task?
Yeah, you mean the name if you want to change?
No, I mean like when we went for this inline task to modify that one to user task, we have
Yeah,
seen there is a decision task, right?
yeah.
So the behavior of that activity will be different when compared to this normal activity.
Of course, we just discussed. I mean, I explained for around 10 minutes
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
decision
just
task.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
understand. So whenever we are taking certain decisions, so
Mm.
it is like we have to go with the decision task, or we can take any activity, and we will implement with the code in that. It is like that, or
No. So in this scenario, decision task cannot be implemented. Whatever scenario we're implementing right now, because the manager has to be some person who will take some action from the
mm,
screen, from the UI. So how can I change
yeah,
it to
yeah. So
decision
wherever
task?
there is automation, we will go for this decision task, right?
Yeah, but decision task cannot be implemented in process. I mean, in your web designer. I mean, I can
Yeah,
definitely add it,
yeah.
but over there I can only implement the service flows, the normal service flows that we have. So a decision service is not available in
Okay.
web designer.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Now, okay. Any other questions, guys? Okay, we are good. So if I'm going too fast, let me know. Then I'll slow down. So we have some time since we started late. So let's understand the variables also today. Okay, like what are the different types of variables that we have in IBM BPM, and what kind of variables we can add in the process. So we'll discuss that and we'll close the session. So let me open. Okay, let me show you first. So you see this process which you're seeing right now at the top. You have a lot of options are there. This definition is where you design the process, and next option you have something called variables. Okay, this variable section, whatever you see right now, tomorrow whenever we are going to create a service flow or a human service, there also you have the same structure, okay? Like input, output, private, and we see something called exposed process variables, okay? And there are few more which we are going to discuss today as well. Now starting from the very first input variable, okay? Now this is a variable which can be added, which we can use uh, either in a process layer, or I can also go and use in the service layers also. So if I add an input variable, you see next to every option there is a plus sign. If I click on the plus sign, a variable will be added, and definitely have to go and rename that variable. I have to give a meaningful name, and definitely I have to see what data type is there. If I want an integer variable, then by default always a string variable is added. Whenever you create a variable in IBM BPM, by default string variables are added, but you can definitely go and change it to any data type you want, integer, boolean, or be it any kind of object if you want to use. So anything you can edit over there. Now what is an input variable? If I define an input variable for this process, it means that I would get that input from some other external process, or from some other service, or from some other application, okay? Any input I'm adding to the process, it actually means that I'm getting that information from outside of this process, okay? So try to understand the scope, okay? So if I am adding some input variable, which means say employee location, so which means that employee location will come as an input to this process from somewhere. It can be some process, it can be some other service, it can also be some other application, okay? Maybe some Java service is sending that data to us, okay? So that data we are say receiving in some service, and we are sending the data to this process. So there also I have to add an input variable, and I can, using an input variable, I can get some information from outside, okay? That is my input variable. Output variable, just the opposite. I create some information in the process, in this process, live application process, and say this information is needed by some other process, or by some other service flows, or by some other application. So I would add that information as an output variable, and I can pass that information outside the process, okay? That's my output variable. Private variable, by the name you can understand what is the scope of this variable. Any kind of information which I want to use within the process, which I don't want to send outside, or I'm not getting something from outside, then in that case I can use a private variable, and I can use this private variable anywhere in my process layer. I can use it in my server script. I can use it to pass the information between the different activities, okay? All these things can be used using a private variable. All these three types of variables are important, and mostly in projects you will see that input, output, and private all are used, okay? So we need to understand it very well. So even the same goes for your service flows or human services also, the same concept. If I'm adding an input variable in a human service, which means that that human service is expecting some information from maybe some other human service, or from some process, or from some other external application, okay? And same goes for output and private also. Any questions on input, output, and private?
No, Rahul, that's good.
Okay. Okay. Now we come to exposed process variables. Okay. So let me open a notepad for this. Now, exposed process variables. People who have worked in Java, there is something called property in Java. It is very similar to that. If I want to define any constant data, any static data in IBM BPM, yes, you can create a private variable, and you can also assign that static data to that variable, and you can use it anywhere in your process. That is something we can do, but it is not recommended in IBM BPM to use any static or hard-coded data in the process layer or in the service layer. So what we usually do, we create an EPV, which is also called as EPV by abbreviation, or expose process variables. And using this expose process variables, we can define some static data. Say I define some expose process variables, say organization name, and the value that I define for the organization name, say, is Daimler. Okay, and wherever I'm using in my process layer or my service layer, whichever place I want to use this data, I can just refer to this EPV over there. Now, is this the only advantage of using an EPV? No. Another advantage, let me tell you. Say this EPV has a constant value. Say I define an EPV, say organization name. It has a value, say Daimler. Now, say I'm using this EPV in many places in my process. I'm using it in my, in my coding, in my codes, wherever I've added the server script in the process layer. Even in my human services or in my service flows, also I'm using this EPV, organization name. And it has a constant value. Whenever you define an EPV, you can define what is the default value for the EPV. Okay. Now you take a snapshot. Say I have to deploy this to some UAT environment. I deploy it over there to UAT. In UAT also the CPV value is Daimler. Obviously I cannot change it because I don't have designer in the testing environment. So obviously default value is Daimler and it is there. The value is same for my production as well as to my UAT environments. Now suddenly the customer comes and tells you that that you need to change the value. Okay. You need to change the value to something else. Daimler is something which we cannot use anymore. So we need to use something else. So maybe we are creating an application for Daimler, say some visitor access management. So what they want this organization name to be changed as Daimler Visitor Access Management. Now just think that if there was no EPV, although we did not discuss about the advantage till now, but just think if there was no EPV and if I was using some private variable to store this data, what kind of overhead the entire team would have gone through, right? I have to go back to my designer. I have to again go back and change the value. I have to take a snapshot. I have to create a version of the snapshot. I have to deploy it to UAT. The testers has to test everything. They will say that yes, everything is working fine. Regression needs to be done because I changed something, and then again I will. It will take a 1 month time to change the entire value, right? I mean to go through the entire process of testing, regression, and everything, and finally we go for a release next month. So 1 month of time. But if I use an EPV, the good thing about EPV is that I can change the value at any point of time in runtime. Okay. And what is the place from where I can change the value of an EPV? Process admin. Okay. So process admin is the component from where I can change the value of an EPV. Yesterday, when I was telling you the features of what are the features of process admin, this is also a very important feature. I did not say this purposely yesterday because you had to understand EPV first before that. So that is the reason I did not say. So one of the main important features of process admin is that you can change the value of an EPV at any point of time. Now, the example that I gave you just now, this might not sound very meaningful. Let me give a very meaningful example. Okay. Now, whenever you define a process, like we have defined our process, we have employee activity, we have added manager activity. Now, every process has a due date, an SLA. Like by this time, I should complete the entire process. Say today, if it is 22nd of February, if I if the employee has submitted the leave details today, then at least by tomorrow, I should complete the entire process. The manager has to approve or reject it by tomorrow. Okay, that is the entire due date basically. Now, at times, now what happens if the due date is crossed? First thing, nothing will happen. The instance will not fail. The instance will still be there. Only that that there are certain performance metrics are there which will be impacted. Like for example, uh, the manager's performance metric can go down because he had to approve it by 23rd of Feb, but say today is say 28th of Feb, but still he has not taken any action. So the metrics of that particular manager may fall down. Maybe if it is observed through some reporting, some audit will definitely show that the manager has not taken proper time to to approve those lead details. Now what happens with these instances? They will remain active for long time because the task is still active over there. Now I can define an additional SLA on top of every activity. Okay, which means that I will wait for some time. I can add a timer. There's something called timer in IBM BPM, and this timer I can define on every activity. And I define a timer of 10 days. This instance will be active for 10 days. This leave application, say Rahul has submitted leave application, so his leave application will remain active for 10 days. Whenever 10 days are reached, I will auto-complete the entire instance. Okay. This exactly happens in every organization. If you see, if you apply for a leave, if your manager does not approve your leave, on the leave date, it gets auto approved, right? So that is something is implemented in every leave application portal of every organization. So the same things I'm defining some some SLA. Now this additional SLA, say I have defined as 30 days, and I have created an EPV, and in that EPV I have defined 30. Okay. Now, obviously, what I would do, usually what we do, if you have the days, then we convert it into minutes. Okay. So 30 into 60. So we convert that into 1800 minutes. Okay. Now that is the, on the timer event, I have defined this EPB. I've defined the value over there. Now tomorrow, if my customer or if my organization tells me that, hey, you have defined 30 days, please change it to 40 days. For that, I don't have to go and change my code at all. I am just going to process admin and changing that value from 1800 to 2400. That's it. That is the only change I'm making. And whatever leave applications are already active, initially they had a value of 1800. Now, automatically, whenever I change that value, now all those instances, all those cases will have a new value of 2400. So, that is the advantage of using an EPB. Okay. Now you can understand how important is this variable. Now definitely this variable is not exposed to everyone. Okay. So which means there is some property called expose. Now guys, whatever I'm discussing right now, I'm just telling you the overview. Obviously we'll see how to create an EPV and how to use it in BPM. Definitely we'll have this session. But today is just the overview where I'm saying what are the different variables that can be used. And this is one of the most important variable that is used in every project. Okay. So EPV is very important, and even your certifications will also have questions from EPVs. Okay. So another important feature is exposing an EPV. So definitely you can understand the significance of this variable. So I mean, process admin, usually the admin team can log in and can change the value. Now, usually what we do, like I was telling yesterday, if it's a production environment, I can also give the access of this EPV value changing to the IT head of the company, or the, yeah, the IT head, or maybe some team, some IT team is there in the organization, so I can expose this EPV value to that particular team. Okay, so this feature is available in EPV. So first is I can assign some constant value. Second is this constant or static value can be changed in runtime from process admin. And whenever I'm creating an EPV, I have to make sure that I have to expose it to some team, and only that team can go and can change the value of that EPV from process admin. Okay, these three are important points, and definitely we're going to see the practical thing also in our coming sessions. This one was EPV. Next is we have very similar environment variable, and we also call it as ENV. Just like EPV, environment variable can also hold some constant or static data. Okay, but we need to understand when to use an EPV and when to use an ENV. Usually for an environment variable, the value will change with every environment. Okay, so for development environment, I will have a value. I will have a different value. For my staging environments, QA or UAT, I will have a different value. For production environment, I will have a different value. So the values will change constantly with every environment. Okay. Now, can you relate what kind of variables I can define? Let me give you an example. Data source, right? Data source can change with every environment. For development environment, I have defined a different JNDI. For testing environment, I have defined a different data source. For production, I have defined a different data source, right? So data sources can change. So I can define this data source value in an environment variable. Okay. And yes, if you ask me, can this value also be changed in runtime? Yes, this value can also be changed in runtime. Usually, we should not. That is the best practice. That is the reason we are using environment variable, because the value is itself changing with every environment. But again, you go and change the value from process admin for environment variable. That is not correct. So ideally, we should not change the value in runtime. We should define it properly. We should have all the values from before, and we should define properly using some environment variable. And whenever we are deploying it to UAT environment, it will automatically take the value of that environment variable of UAT environment. Whenever I'm deploying the same code to production, automatically the value will be taken from the production environment. Okay, this way it happens automatically. We don't have to do any configuration also. So, but yes, there are ways to write these variables, define these variables in code. So that is not something we have seen till now. So we are definitely going to cover this in our lab sessions. I'm going to show you how to implement an environment variable, or how to implement expose process variables, all these things. Yes, and one more thing is that uh, unlike an EPV, I cannot expose an environment variable to anything. Okay. For an EPV, whenever I'm defining an EPV, I also have to define which team is exposed to change that value. But for an environment variable, I cannot define that, which means anyone who has the access to process admin unfortunately can change the value of an environment variable. There is no restriction. Okay. If I have the admin access, how I have the admin access, how I can understand? Yesterday we discussed tw underscore admin, right? We have that group tw underscore admin. If I am part of that group, I am also an admin. Okay. So if I am an admin, I can go and change the value of environment variable. All right. So this is how we can summarize our EPVs and ENVs in this way. And yes, we are definitely going to see some features of them in our sessions. Okay. So we have input variables, output variables, private variables, and what else we have? We have expose process variables, and we have environment variable. Okay. So this many variables we have in IBM BPM. We have one more, which we have discussed tomorrow, because that will take some time. And the reason why I don't want to show it today, because not only I will define that, but also I need to include that in our process. So that will take some time. Okay. So just one thing, one exercise that I would give you. Uh, till the time you install IBM BPM, there is no issue. You can register yourself under BW trial. That's a 30 days trial version that you get. And whatever sessions we are having, please practice them. Okay, this is something very important, that whatever lab sessions we are covering, you go back and practice the same thing. Okay, at least half an hour, 1 hour you have to give. And you can understand it's an interactive session, so definitely there will be some questions and answers that will be exchanged. And obviously whatever we are doing parallelly, you also need to complete the same at your end. So if you face any problem for installation, if you don't have the tool, then in that case you should go and use BAW trial version. Okay, BAW trial, uh, all the features are there. Only the thing is that you cannot create any users over there, and the second thing is that you cannot do any database integration. So these two things are not available. Yes.
Uh, um, Rahul. So,
Yes.
in case I am not able to install, maybe
Hmm.
the RAM is not enough. So,
Hmm.
BAW will work for our sessions, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
BAW trial you can use. Yes.
Okay. So I'll register for that also. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And one more question, Rahul.
Hmm.
Um, how to search? Just now you said, right? In our code, we have used
Hmm.
a certain EPV
Hmm.
or some variable with
Hmm.
name. Now I want to search that in this code. How
Hmm.
difficult it is, or what is the way to search anything specific in the code?
Okay, so you were saying that say I have written some code on EPV. Now say I have to find out. So a lot of codes are there. I
Yes.
need to find out where. So we haven't come to that session till now.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay. Then
tomorrow's
I can wait.
session,
Yeah. Then I
yeah.
can wait. Yeah. Thank
So
you.
yeah, basically these variables, how whatever you define, right? Input, output, private or EPVs. So obviously you're providing some name over
Hmm.
there. So you can just do Control F and using that name you can search. Okay. And there are certain namespaces. That is the reason I'm saying that tomorrow we'll cover that.
Okay.
There are certain namespaces like for EPV we use the namespace EPV. For environment variable we use the namespace ENV. For any input, output or private variable we use the namespace local. Okay. So again for any system variables we use a namespace system. So by searching with this also you can try to find out like it is like tw.epv dot the EPV name.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. We'll discuss about this
Yeah. Sure.
namespaces
Sure.
tomorrow.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any doubts or any queries on today's session?
No, Rahul, I'm good.
Same here, Rahul. I'm good.
Yeah, Rahul, one more query. I have small query related to this saving of data.
Hmm.
Generally, like in standalone, we will save this one into database, right? If we
Hmm.
go to this cloud, that time also it will go for the standalone database or
Yeah, you can even define a standalone database in cloud also. Okay.
okay, okay, yeah,
So I can define. I mean, I should have some application database, right? So application database I can connect to my BW on cloud and I can use it.
okay, thank you.
Cloud is just I am just saving this entire thing whatever I'm defining this process or this application.
Mhm.
I'm actually defining everything in cloud. Database connections and everything I have to create separately. For that I will have some application DB which I have to configure, Oracle or DB2. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay, fine. So here, this will save automatically, like a snapshot, right? As you discussed before, like auto snapshots, right? We are not creating separate snapshots here. Like create, we are not saving it manually. It will
Like
save
doc-
automatically.
yeah, talking about cloud.
Yeah, yeah. In the cloud
No,
when we are doing this.
no. So snapshot is different thing. Okay, so see, this is a repository, workflow center, right?
Yeah.
Workflow center is nothing but my repository. So this repository right now is available under my host name. I have installed this IBM BPM in my host, right, in my system, local
Yes.
system.
Yes. Yes.
If I talk about cloud, there is no local system. There is no concept of local system. There is a concept of cloud where we are, it's a kind of server where we are installing everything,
Correct.
and automatically the configurations and everything are saved on the cloud. So whatever process applications or whatever we are defining,
Mhm.
so yes, I am defining them in my workflow center, which is actually placed on a cloud environment.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Means
that
it,
is a
it
difference.
it will save automatically. Like we are not clicking on save button anywhere.
No, no, that
Like
is no, that is
yeah.
no, no. Save that will happen. That save you have to do. I mean, whatever changes you are making on your artifacts,
Oh,
so
yes.
definitely you have to save that. But yes, after you save them, I mean, everything is actually getting saved on your cloud environment.
Okay, okay, got it. Yes, yes.
Okay. Any other doubts, guys? You're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay then. It's almost 10. We can close it here. Tomorrow, let's connect somewhere around 10 past 8.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Nice. Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Have a good day.
Thank you.